My name is Alice Thorne, and for as long as I can remember, my world has been shaped by the quiet, orderly hush of history. I am an archivist at Sterling University's Special Collections Library in Port Blossom, a city that feels like it's perpetually caught in the soft, golden light of a late afternoon. Here, nestled between rolling hills and the gentle curve of the Pacific, my days are spent in the company of brittle paper, the scent of aging leather, and the faint, sweet smell of bookbinder's glue. I find a profound comfort in the meticulous cataloging of the past, in giving a precise order to the beautiful chaos of human stories. My life is a carefully curated collection of peace, of quiet mornings with my husband, Leo, and of evenings spent reading on our small porch, listening to the distant sigh of the ocean. Leo is a carpenter, a man whose hands are as steady and honest as his heart. He works with wood, coaxing beauty from raw timber, and I work with paper, preserving the fragile whispers of time. We built a life together that feels like a well-tended garden, simple and calm, and intentionally small. It's the life I chose, the life I needed. It is a world away from the one I grew up in, a world that revolved around the brilliant, unpredictable, and often destructive gravity of my younger sister, Clara. Clara is an artist, or rather, she is the idea of an artist. She doesn't just paint or sculpt, she inhabits her creativity like a grand, theatrical performance. Her life has been a series of passionate, short-lived ventures, each one announced as her true calling, the project that would finally change everything. There was the artisanal honey phase, the hand-thrown pottery that never quite centered, and the foray into sustainable fashion that produced exactly 3 lopsided hats. My parents have always called her a visionary. I, the quiet, practical older sister, was designated her anchor. It was my unspoken role to remain steady, to be the calm harbor she could return to after every glorious, inevitable shipwreck. I was the one who helped draft the business plans, who listened to the tearful late-night calls when a kiln misfired or a supplier vanished, the one who quietly paid a bill she'd forgotten. I loved my sister, but I had learned to love her from a safe distance, a distance I had carefully, painstakingly constructed over the years. The day the crate arrived was my 34th birthday. I have never been one for celebrations. A quiet dinner with Leo is all the fanfare I need. That Tuesday began like any other. The morning fog had lifted, leaving behind a sky the color of pale cornflowers. I was in the university's conservation lab, a sterile, sunlit room on the top floor of the library, meticulously repairing the spine of an 18th-century botanical atlas. The work required a surgeon's focus, a delicate dance of paste, linen, and patience. It was my sanctuary. It was Dr. Julian Croft who brought it to my attention. He was the head archivist, a man who moved with the same quiet reverence as the ancient texts he curated. His silver hair was always perfectly combed, his tweed jackets smelled faintly of Earl Grey tea, and he noticed everything. "Alice," he said, his voice soft, standing in the doorway. "There is a delivery for you downstairs." A personal item, it seems. Rather unusual. I looked up, my concentration broken. Personal mail was always directed to our home address. "Are you sure it's for me? Your name is on the manifest." "A wooden crate," he added, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He stepped aside as I followed him down to the main receiving area. And there it was. It wasn't a cardboard box, but a handsome, rustic-looking crate, about the size of a footlocker, crafted from what looked like reclaimed pine. It was stenciled with my name and the library's address. It was the kind of thing Clara would find beautiful. "It's likely from my sister," I said with a small, tired smile. "It's my birthday." She has a flair for the dramatic. Dr. Croft didn't smile back. He adjusted his spectacles and peered at the shipping label. "The courier," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Swift Wing. I've heard that name before. Are they reliable?" I asked, tracing the stenciled letters of my name. "I'm not sure reliable is the word I would use," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "A colleague at the Getty mentioned them. There was some unpleasantness. Disputed provenance of a few artifacts they were hired to transport. Nothing proven, of course. Just whispers." He gave the crate a final, cautious look. I'm sure it's nothing. Happy birthday, my dear. He turned and walked away, his quiet footsteps echoing on the marble floor. But his words hung in the air, a small, cold stone dropped into the placid pool of my day. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the crate. It felt solid and heavy, an object full of unspoken intentions. A gift from Clara was never just a gift. It was a statement, a request, a piece of a story I would inevitably be pulled into. And for the first time, standing there in the sun-drenched silence of the archive, I felt a deep, instinctual reluctance to open it. I told the receiving clerk I would arrange to have it picked up later and went back to my botanical atlas, but the delicate work of restoration now felt clumsy in my hands. My peace had been disturbed. The unease lingered all afternoon, a faint, discordant note under the familiar harmony of my day. I couldn't shake the image of the crate, so artfully rustic, so deliberately performative. It was Clara's signature all over. When I got home that evening, the scent of fresh sawdust and Leo's cooking greeted me at the door, a comforting balm. He was in the kitchen, his brow furrowed in concentration as he stirred a pot of risotto. He looked up and smiled, and the knot in my chest loosened. "Happy birthday," he said, wiping his hands on a towel and wrapping me in a warm hug. "How was the world of ancient paper?" "Eventful, surprisingly," I said, leaning into him. "I received a delivery at work. A giant wooden crate from Clara." Leo's eyebrows rose. "A crate? Not a card." "It's very on-brand for her," I said, trying to make light of it. "But something about it feels off." I told him about the courier, Swift Wing, and Dr. Croft's quiet warning. He listened patiently, his expression growing more serious. "And you didn't open it?" "No. I left it there. I had a feeling." "Always trust your feelings," he said, turning back to the stove. "Especially when it comes to your sister." Just then, my phone rang. The screen glowed with a picture of my mother, smiling from a garden she was immensely proud of. I answered, putting her on speaker. "Alice, darling. Happy birthday." Her voice was effervescent, a champagne cocktail of forced cheerfulness that she usually reserved for smoothing over family tensions. "Thanks, Mom. Did you get our little surprise?" "Clara was so excited for it to arrive on your special day." "The crate, yes. It arrived at the university this morning." There was a beat of silence, and then, a little too quickly, she asked, "Oh, good. Have you opened it yet?" "Clara chose everything herself. She said it was meant to inspire you." "I haven't had the chance," I lied, my voice steady. "It's been a busy day." Leo caught my eye from across the kitchen, a knowing look on his face. "Oh," my mother said, and the manufactured brightness in her tone faltered for just a second. "Well, you must tell us what you think. We're all just so proud of how you've built your life, dear. You've always been our anchor, you know that. So steady. Anchor." There it was. The word they always used. It wasn't a compliment. It was a job description. An anchor doesn't get to sail. It just holds everything in place while the beautiful ship gets all the attention. The conversation wound down with more airy pleasantries, but her words echoed in my mind long after I'd hung up. She hadn't asked what was in the box. She had asked if I'd opened it. There was a difference, and it was a difference that mattered. "The anchor speech," Leo said dryly, portioning risotto onto 2 plates. "That means something's wrong." "It always does," I sighed, sinking into a chair at our small wooden table. We ate in comfortable silence, the weight of the unspoken filling the space between us. For years, Leo had been a quiet observer of my family's dynamics. He never judged, but he saw the patterns I had been trained to ignore. He saw the subtle manipulations, the emotional transactions disguised as love. He was the one who had gently taught me that saying no was not an act of aggression, but an act of self-preservation. The next morning, I called Dr. Croft before I even left for work. "Julian," I said, my voice more resolute than I felt. "I have a strange request. I'd like you to call university security about that crate. I don't want it opened, just inspected. The shipping company, the manifest, everything. I have a bad feeling about it." "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "I took the liberty of looking into Swift Wing couriers last night. Their registration is tied to a holding company with a rather colorful history. I'll make the call right now. When I arrived at the library, 2 uniformed security officers were standing by the crate with Dr. Croft. They were looking at a printed manifest. One of them, a kind-faced woman named Officer Morales, turned to me. "Ma'am, is your name Alice Thorne?" "Yes." "And are you an acquisitions partner for a company called Aura Artisans?" My blood ran cold. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm an archivist." "Well," she said, holding out the manifest. "According to this document, you are. It says here you shipped this crate from a private workshop in the north of the state to yourself here at the university for archival assessment." I stared at the paper. There was my name, my professional address, and below it, a swirling, artistic signature that was a passable, if flamboyant, imitation of my own. My mind flashed back to a year ago, to a form I had co-signed for Clara to get a small art grant, a form she'd sworn was just a formality. I had been so careless. Dr. Croft cleared his throat. "Given the suspicious nature of the courier and the discrepancy in the manifest, I believe we have justification to open the crate in the presence of security." I nodded, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. One of the officers used a crowbar to pry open the lid. The sound of wood splintering was unnaturally loud in the quiet hall. Inside, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, were 5 small, abstract sculptures. They were made of a dark, polished stone, elegant and modern. They were undeniably beautiful. But tucked beside them was a portfolio. Officer Morales carefully lifted it out and opened it. Inside were certificates of authenticity for each sculpture, listing their provenance as a private collection in Europe. At the bottom of each certificate was the name of the appraiser, Alice Thorne. And beside them was an article, printed from an obscure art blog, detailing the recent, unsolved theft of several small sculptures from a gallery in Brussels. The sculptures in the photograph were identical to the ones in the crate. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. This wasn't a misguided birthday gift. It was a Trojan horse, and it had just been wheeled inside the walls of my carefully constructed life. The hours that followed were a blur of sterile rooms and quiet, serious questions. I sat in a conference room with Dr. Croft, Officer Morales, and the university's legal counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. I told them everything I knew, my voice low but steady. I told them about Clara, her string of failed businesses, her tendency to blur boundaries. I told them about Aura Artisans, a name I'd heard her mention, and my explicit refusal to be involved or to let her use my name or the university's address. Miss Davies listened, her fingers steepled, her expression unreadable. "So, your sister establishes a company, forges your name on shipping manifests and certificates of authenticity, and then ships stolen art to your place of work, making it appear as if you were using your professional credentials to appraise and acquire illicit goods?" Hearing it laid out so clinically made it sound even more insane. "It appears so, yes. We will handle this internally for now," she said. "We'll need to secure your work computer and any correspondence you've had with your sister regarding this venture. We need to protect you, Alice, but more importantly, we need to protect the university's reputation." I felt a wave of nausea. My quiet, orderly world was being cordoned off like a crime scene. That night, Leo and I sat at our kitchen table, a fortress of documents spread between us. I had printed every email, every text message from Clara over the past 2 years. There was nothing explicitly incriminating, but there was a pattern, a breadcrumb trail of her casual entitlement. "Alice, I have this amazing idea, and you'd be the perfect person to help with the boring paperwork side of things. Can I use your address for a small delivery? It's just easier than my place. You know how messy my studio is." I had said no to that one firmly. "I found this old document with your signature on it. You have such a lovely, professional script." Each message, innocent on its own, now felt like a piece of a carefully constructed trap. Leo found the Aura Artisans website. It was slick and professional, full of vague, inspiring language about curated artistic experiences. And there, on the About Us page, was a photo of me, a candid shot from a family gathering, cropped and filtered. Beneath it, a biography I had never written. Alice Thorne, head of acquisitions and provenance, brings a historian's eye and an archivist's integrity to our collection. There was even a quote attributed to me about the importance of liberating art for a new generation of collectors. She built a whole fake version of you, Leo said, his voice laced with a quiet fury he rarely showed. Just as he spoke, my father called. I hesitated, then answered. Alice, he began, his voice heavy with a forced, paternal gravity. Your mother told me about the mix-up with the package. Now, let's not overreact. Your sister, she's a free spirit. She doesn't think about consequences. She used my name to ship stolen art, Dad. These aren't consequences, this is a federal crime. She's fragile, Alice, he said, his voice softening into the familiar, pleading tone I knew so well. It was the tone that had always worked on me. An investigation like this, the shame of it, it would break her. But you're strong. You can handle this. You can smooth it over. You're strong. It wasn't a compliment. It was a life sentence. It meant you can absorb the pain that we are unwilling to let her feel. It meant your resilience is a resource for us to exploit. I'm not strong enough to go to prison for her, I said, my voice cold and sharp. And I'm not willing to lose the life I've built because she's fragile. I ended the call before he could reply. The silence that followed was thick with the weight of 20 years of this dynamic. The brilliant, fragile artist and the strong, responsible anchor. A family myth we had all agreed to believe. I looked at Leo, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. They chose, I whispered. They've always chosen her. Yes, he said softly, reaching across the table to take my hand. His own was rough with calluses, a comforting, solid presence. They have. But now you get to choose yourself. And in that quiet moment, in our small kitchen filled with the ghosts of my family's expectations, something inside me shifted. The anchor had just pulled up its chain. The days that followed were a strange mixture of quiet support from my colleagues and the cold, methodical process of a formal investigation. The university's legal team worked swiftly, creating a firewall between me and the burgeoning scandal. They documented my full cooperation, my immediate reporting of the suspicious crate, and the clear evidence of forgery. They were protecting the institution, but in doing so, they were also validating my story. Dr. Croft was a quiet pillar of support, often stopping by my desk with a cup of tea, never mentioning the investigation directly, but conveying with a simple, kind look that he believed me. The university reported their findings to the authorities, and soon I was speaking with a detective from the Port Blossom Police Department who specialized in art fraud. He was a patient man who listened as I recounted the long, tangled history of my relationship with Clara, of my role as the family fixer. With Leo's quiet encouragement, I delved deeper into the digital life of Aura Artisans. We hired a cybersecurity expert, a young woman who, within hours, uncovered the digital architecture of Clara's deceit. The business had been registered online using a credit card in my father's name. The website was hosted through an account linked to an email address that was a variation of my own, alice.thorne.acquisitions@gmail.com. There were invoices, bank transfers from our parents' joint account to suppliers of packing materials, and even a loan application to a small business fund, submitted in my name, with a forged financial statement claiming I had significant personal assets. Clara hadn't just borrowed my name, she had colonized my identity. The worst discovery was a scan of my passport. I remembered sending it to her 3 years ago when she needed a second form of ID to sign a lease and had lost her driver's license. Just this once, Alice, you're saving my life, she had pleaded. I had caved. Now, that act of sisterly assistance had become a weapon used against me. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep became a shallow, restless state. During the day, I moved through my work at the archive with a sense of detachment, as if I were watching a film of my own life. The quiet, orderly world I cherished now felt fragile, a thin veneer over a chasm of chaos. The botanical atlas sat on my workbench, its restoration paused, a silent testament to a time when my biggest concern was the delicate integrity of paper, not the complete fabrication of my life. One evening, my mother showed up at our door, unannounced. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller, stripped of her usual forced buoyancy. Leo answered the door and stood there, a silent, unmovable guardian. "I need to speak with Alice," she said, her voice trembling. Leo looked at me, a questioning arch in his eyebrow. I gave a slight nod, and he stepped aside. My mother stood awkwardly in our living room, a space she had always described as sweet, with a faint air of condescension. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she began, the tremor in her voice replaced by a thread of steel. "The police came to our house. They questioned your father. They took Clara's computer." "I told the truth," I said simply. "The truth," she scoffed, a bitter, unfamiliar sound. "You could have said it was a mistake. A mix-up. We could have handled it quietly as a family." "A family doesn't ask one child to sacrifice herself for the other," I said, my voice as calm and even as I could make it. "That's not family. That's a cult of personality, with Clara at the center. She never meant for this to happen," she cried, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "She just wanted to build something beautiful. She gets so carried away by her visions. You know how she is. You're the practical one. You were supposed to be her safety net." "A safety net is meant to catch someone when they fall," I replied, the words coming from a place of deep, old clarity. "It's not meant to be woven into a parachute for them to jump out of a plane with no intention of pulling the cord. I am not your safety net anymore, Mom. I'm not the anchor. I'm not the strong one. I am just done." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for the right words, the right combination of guilt and love that had always worked before. But she found none. The spell was broken. She turned and walked out, leaving a silence that felt, for the first time, like my own. The meeting with the district attorney was the final step. I sat with Leo and Ms. Davies in a sterile government office and handed over the binder I had compiled, a meticulous archive of my own life, presented as evidence. I signed a formal statement, my real signature clear and firm on the page. As we left, Ms. Davies placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You did the right thing, Alice. You have more integrity than most people I know." Walking out into the afternoon sun, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a sliver of something else, relief. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had simply stepped out of the rubble of a structure that had been crumbling for years. I had chosen to save myself, and in doing so, I had finally told the truth. The legal process moved with a slow, grinding inevitability. Clara was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and trafficking in stolen goods. My parents were charged with accessory to fraud. Faced with the mountain of digital evidence, their lawyers advised them to take a plea deal. There was no dramatic trial, no courtroom showdown. Just a quiet hearing that I chose not to attend. Clara was sentenced to 3 years of probation, a significant fine, and mandatory counseling. My parents received a lesser fine and 200 hours of community service. Their names, once a source of quiet suburban pride, were now listed in the public record of the county court. I learned of the verdict through a brief, formal email from the DA's office. I read it, closed my laptop, and went out to the garden Leo and I had been tending. I spent the rest of the afternoon on my knees in the dirt, pulling weeds, my hands sinking into the cool, dark earth. I felt a sense of finality, a quiet closing of a long and painful chapter. It wasn't victory. It was just closure. My job, my reputation, and my peace at the university were restored. Ms. Davies had ensured my file contained a letter of commendation for my role in uncovering the fraud, and Dr. Croft, in his own understated way, had assigned me to lead the acquisition of a prestigious collection of historical maps, a clear vote of confidence. A few weeks after the sentencing, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar, tamed and careful. It was from Clara. My first instinct was to throw it away, to not let her words breach the peace I had fought so hard to win. But Leo, ever my voice of gentle reason, simply said, "You don't have to reply. But maybe you deserve to read it." That evening I sat on the porch, the sky turning a soft shade of lavender, and opened the letter. It was short, only a few lines. "Alice, I am sorry. Those words aren't big enough for what I did. All my life, I thought being an artist meant I didn't have to live in the real world. I used you as my bridge to that world, and I never thought about how much weight a bridge can hold. I am in therapy. I am working. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally see it. I see you. Clara. I read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it inside a book on my nightstand. The words didn't magically heal the years of hurt, but they were a start. A seed of something new, planted in scorched earth. Forgiveness was a distant country I wasn't ready to visit, but for the first time, I could see it on a map. My life in Port Blossom settled back into its quiet rhythm. The sound of Leo's hammer from his workshop, the scent of old paper in the archive, the murmur of the ocean at dusk. These simple things were my refuge, the foundations of a life I had reclaimed. The world was no longer divided into the fragile artist and the strong anchor. There was just me, Alice. A woman who understood the value of history, the importance of truth, and the quiet, unyielding strength it takes to respectfully close a book on a story that is over. One morning, I returned to the Botanical Atlas. I picked up my tools, my hands steady now, and looked at the intricate, faded drawing of a deeply rooted oak tree. For a long time, I had thought my strength was in my ability to endure, to hold fast against the storm. But I was wrong. True strength, I now understood, was not in the roots that held you down. It was in the branches that knew when it was time to let go, to release the dead leaves, and to reach, unencumbered, toward the light.